nationalists salute the Nazi flag in his name. They were saying that we are keeping Donald Trump's promise, and he thinks that these are fine people. He stood behind the podium with the seal of the presidency, of the White House, and he continued to enable them, he encouraged them, he defended them. This is the type of president that we have currently in the Oval Office. And here's the thing, Joy, it's not just the country that's watching, it's the world that's watching. It's that our adversaries, our allies are watching this. And this is incredibly disturbing as a mother, as a woman, as a black person, as a person in the LGBTQ community. This is disturbing, and we cannot defend Donald Trump. Republicans need to stand up, have a backbone, and stop enabling this man. The leaders on the Hill need to take action. Enough is enough.
And Mr. Obama, why do you suppose that neo-Nazis and white supremacists like Donald Trump so much? They were praising him after his response on Monday to that march in Charlottesville. Why do you think they like him so much?
Well, they shouldn't. Remember, I said
they
never should have been allowed.
No. Wait, let's go back to my question. Why do you think David Duke and white nationalists and white supremacists chant things like "Heil Trump"? They chant "Heil Trump." Why do you think they like him so much?
I have no idea why they like them. They're a fringe group, less than 0.001% of the population. They shouldn't exist. They all should be in jail.
But why do you think they like Donald Trump so much?
Look, some of them could be provocateurs, so I don't know.
You think they're making it up too? You think they're lying when they say they like Donald Trump?
No, I'm sure some of them might say that, and some could be provocateurs. I'm not sure. But look, any fringe group can say they love whatever politician they want. It's fake news. But it doesn't mean that politician believes in that ideology of that person who stood up.
If that politician then turns around and defends them and says some of the people among them were fine people, what does that say to you?
There's no way to defend the neo-Nazis.
But Donald Trump did. He defended them. He said there were fine people among those people who were chanting, "You will not replace us. Jews will not replace us." He said among that group of young men who said Jews will not replace us, there were fine people. Do you think there were fine people in that group?
I wasn't there.
But you saw them on TV.
So.
I mean, you could see them.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know why anyone respectable would have been marching with them.
Okay.
Why any normal citizen. So I'm in as much disbelief as you are.
Yeah. So at least that's good. You at least disagree with Donald Trump on that one thing. Thank you very much, Ken Abramovitz. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, James Peterson, as well. Karine Jean-Pierre and Jennifer Rubin will be back with us. And up next, a Trump loyalist makes a fanboy trip to meet an enemy of America. Donald Trump's soft stance on white supremacists may have pushed Russia off the front pages this week, but Russiagate was still in the news. Putin-loving Republican Congressman Dana Rohrabacher has confirmed he met Wednesday with Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, the organization U.S. intelligence has identified as Russia's distribution channel for emails stolen from the Democratic National Committee. The congressman said that he wants to share with Donald Trump the details of his chat with Assange, including Assange's denial that the Russians were behind the DNC email hacks. Except now, the FBI may not have to take Assange's or Rohrabacher's word for it, because according to the New York Times, a hacker who U.S. intelligence has identified as the creator of a program that was used in the Russian hacking during the election turned himself in earlier this year and has now become an FBI witness. Joining me now, MSNBC contributor Malcolm Nance and MSNBC intelligence analyst Naveed Jamali. Thank you all for being here. Naveed, I'm going to start with you on this. This hacker, he is identified, I believe, as a Ukrainian malware expert who is said to be able to potentially blow the whistle on Russian hacking. What's the import of having him turn witness?
Well, so the biggest problem that the Russian investigation has faced is that the sort of drawing these direct links back to the Kremlin. So we've had this cast of characters from the Donald Jr. meeting where they might be Russian nationals, but it's hard to definitively say if they were in fact Russian officials. Having someone who's working, who's turned themselves into the FBI, is cooperating with the investigation, who may be able to solidify those lines back to Russia, while for most of us, we are sort of at the point of saying, of course Russia was involved. It's important to establish physically an evidentiary that Russia was in fact directly involved in this. And if he can actually connect those dots directly, regardless of the hacking involvement, but connect the dots directly to Russia, that is a huge step. And more importantly, if he can connect that back to somehow to the Trump or to Trump himself, that is even a larger issue.
And Malcolm Nance, you know, where does WikiLeaks play into all of this? Because obviously they deny that they got the information from Russia in the first place. Could this hacker potentially prove that they are lying?
Yes, he could. And that's because WikiLeaks turned out to be the Russian cutout for this activity. That's an intelligence term of art for a middleman who takes on your information and passes it on and gives it an air of legitimacy. And that's what WikiLeaks did. They flooded the zone with all this information, which came from Russia. But let me touch on this hacker for a minute. What he has is he has the electronic genetic code, so to speak, of the malware suite that Russian intelligence stole from him and used to create the advanced persistent threat software that was used to hack the DNC. So he can give the FBI, as a working witness, the actual fingerprint of his malware and show how it was modified by Russia for the use of the DNC. So you know, there were lots of other characteristics about these malwares that were used, like the fact that they used Cyrillic keyboards and were linked back to a Russian intelligence server. But this is going to be a treasure trove of information. And
Naveed, one of the other interesting aspects of this whole Rohrabacher weird meeting with Assange is who set it up. It was set up by a blogger named Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson is somebody who is known to those on the internet as an internet troll, as somebody who is a Holocaust denier, and an alt-right blogger. He reportedly set the meeting up. This is him standing and smiling with Dana Rohrabacher outside of that embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he set up the meeting. Rohrabacher's team, I believe, has confirmed the meeting was set up by this blogger. And there he is giving what a lot of people believe is the white power sign, which sort of looks like the OK sign. Very strange. What do you make of that connection?
Well, it's exactly to sort of what Malcolm is saying is, you know, Russian fingerprints. They're all over this, and it seems to me that the Russians have this large network of these sort of undesirables that they've been able to tap into, and somehow these people are acting. I mean, look, they're acting as frankly as Malcolm said, as cutouts. And it seems to me that why a congressman would go meet with Assange, why Assange wanted to meet with a congressman, what he has to tell Trump, the whole thing just reeks of oddity and Russian, just frankly, Russian fingerprints. So I don't understand exactly what's going on with this. I don't understand, you know, how the Russians got into this group, but certainly they seem to be using this whole movement to support Trump and to somehow be involved in this.
To you know, using sort of obscure bloggers. We're going to talk about another one of them in the next hour, Malcolm. One of Rohrabacher's political opponents in California now wants the FBI to investigate him for that meeting. He's been accused in the past of potentially violating U.S. sanctions in the Magnitsky Act when he tried to get the deputy general prosecutor in Russia removed from U.S. sanctions last year. He's a guy who's long been known to have an affinity, claims he lost an arm wrestling match to Putin back in the 90s. He has a very weird set of affinities. What do you make of this confluence between him and an alt-right blogger that he uses as the go-between to set up the Assange meeting?
Well, to be honest, I really believe, and I've spoken about this extensively, that right now the Senate Intelligence Committee, the FBI, and the House Intelligence Committee have made it clear that they are investigating Americans who were in cooperation communication and quite possibly co-opted by Russian intelligence, which makes them sort of a fifth column. And we've found that that fifth column is ultimately made up of alt-righters who view that Trump's policy towards Russia and Russia's policy towards the United States furthers their goals in their, you know, neo-Nazi white supremacy world. The Russians are actually hosting an alt-right white supremacist conference in Hungary in the next month featuring Richard Spencer. I don't know if Dana Rohrabacher is all of that. I've met him. I see he's a very sincere person. He actually believes these relationships with the United States and Russia should be improved. You know, he's an old Vietnam veteran. You've got to give him props for his service. But he himself may have invisible fingerprints and strings that are working around him with guys like, you know, Johnson and some of the others in the alt-right that are being used for Russia's own political purposes to damage or destroy American democracy.
And really quickly before we go, Naveed, just walk us through how Russian intelligence would use sort of what could have been an obscure blogger who most Americans have never heard of. How would these guys, there's the guy in Florida who says he could get Hillary Clinton's emails, there's this guy, Charles Johnson, how would Russian intelligence interact with them and use them?
Well, that's a very good question. And very quickly, what I'm seeing here, as someone who worked against the Russians, is I get the sense, Joy, that the Russians were, in fact, very scared of being identified, that they actually, whatever they intended to do in the 2016 election, I think the second part of them gaming out this moment right here, they wanted to make sure that there was plausible deniability. So with that, I think that the cast of characters that you're seeing that the Russians may have had connections to is not the traditional folks we have here. Now, look, we can go back to what ISIS did with eBay in terms of getting money to these people, you know, buying products. There's all sorts of creative ways that they could have gotten to these people, funding them on GoFundMe or Patreon. You know, bloggers who use YouTube views. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to get money and to get messages to them. So I think what we're looking at is this sort of non-traditional way of getting this sort of fringe element to, frankly, support them directly and honestly on the social media platforms. That seems to have been a huge part of this, and it is, you know, it is frankly shocking.
Yeah, if you saw an obscure right-wing, potentially even on the racist right blogger, suddenly pop in supporters, in followers, and jump up in YouTube views, you know, and if they were suddenly getting a lot of money in their Patreon accounts and they don't have a, you know, verifiable source of income, you might want to look into it a little bit.
Yeah, that seems like...
Huh?
That seems like a good place for the Senate and the Congress to look into, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Naveed Jamali, thank you very much. Malcolm will join us again in our next hour. And up next, Trump's affection for losers.
News doesn't just break.
We've seen the president lawyer up.
Intense questions on the wake of this investigation.
Splinters in different directions.
North Korea is now issuing new threats.
Takes unexpected twists and turns.
White House senior staffers playing defense on yet another Russia story.
Donald Trump loves a winner, so why did he just spend the last week defending Nazis and Confederate sympathizers, two groups who are among history's greatest losers? The defeat of Nazism in World War II is well-trodden source material for countless movies and TV shows. But the legacy of the Confederacy and how it went from treason in the name of slavery to a romanticized, supposedly noble and valiant lost cause is lesser known. After the Civil War, the South was a despondent, defeated region, a place that certainly wasn't flying the Confederate flag or building monuments to secession. The years immediately after the Civil War, known as Reconstruction, also marked a remarkable period of political participation by African Americans in the South. Nearly 2,000 African Americans held public office all the way up to the United States Senate. The Ku Klux Klan formed in December of 1865, only months after Robert E. Lee's surrender, and grew rapidly in violent opposition to black political power. It was kept in check at first by the presence of federal troops throughout the South. But the feds pulled out in 1877, and so began Jim Crow. Left to their own devices, Southern states systematically removed African Americans from civic life, took away their right to vote, segregated every possible public space, and found new ways to criminalize African Americans in order to imprison and virtually re-enslave them. The South enforced the new order, not only with brutality, including lynchings and violent coups, but with visible, concrete reminders, ones that towered over town squares throughout the South. This is when the South began reimagining Confederate leaders as noble defenders of a lost cause of Southern gentility. They got a boost when segregationist Woodrow Wilson took office, even screening at the White House the film Birth of a Nation, which portrayed the KKK as heroic protectors of Southern whiteness. This era, the 1910s and 20s, were the peak of the building of Confederate monuments. There was a second spike and another revival of Confederate lore that coincided with the backlash against the Civil Rights Movement. Southern members of Congress invoked states' rights in 1956 when they called for resistance to the Supreme Court's desegregation order in Brown versus the Board of Education. By that year, 7 states had incorporated Confederate symbolism into their flags. And throughout the 50s and 60s, more statues were built, and dozens of public schools were renamed for Confederate icons. They seemed to forget that the people they were revering were traitors and seditionists who lost the Civil War. These are statues to losers. So why does Mr. You'll Get Tired of Winning, Donald Trump, love them so much? More on that next.
But many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Reverence for the Confederacy runs deep for Donald Trump, so deep that he had a monument commemorating a Civil War battle built on the grounds of the Trump National Golf Club in Virginia, with a plaque declaring it the site of the so-called River of Blood, a battle so gruesome that it turned the nearby Potomac River red. A stunning moment in American history, except that it never happened. Experts can't recall any battles taking place on the grounds of the golf course. The New York Times asked Trump about the plaque in 2015, and his response was Trumpian. That was a prime site for river crossings, Mr. Trump said. So if people are crossing the river and you happen to be in a civil war, I would say the people were shot. A lot of them. Any battles taking place on the grounds of the golf course. And you happen to be in a civil war, I would say the people were shot. A lot of them. River of Blood. That same penchant for alternative facts was on display last Tuesday when Trump equated the white nationalists in Charlottesville to the people protesting them.
Excuse me, they didn't put themselves down as you, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Very fine people. Joining me now, Andrew Gillum, mayor of Tallahassee and candidate for Florida governor. Jimmy Williams, host of the Decode DC podcast. And back with me, Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post. Jimmy, I'm going to go to you first. So the New York Times did a pretty compelling piece on the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, and found that there are 3 times more Confederate statues in Statuary Hall than there are of black people in all of Capitol Hill. There are 12 Confederate statues in the National Statuary Hall. There are 4 bust or statues of black Americans in the entire Capitol. What do you make of this sort of romanticization of the Confederacy, and what are sort of the average white Southerner, what do they learn about the Confederacy growing up?
Well, when I was a kid, you were taught that well, no. We can't we don't have enough time in this show. When I was a kid, I was taught that the Civil War was about economics. Of course, it was about economics. It's called free labor, also known as slavery. We just left that part out in our history books. Look, the thing in the Capitol, the states are allowed to send 2 statues to the Capitol, and so the states decide what those are. Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader, sent a letter to Speaker Ryan the other day saying that those should come down. Well, when she was Speaker of the House, those same statues were there, too. So I find it a little bit hypocritical that the Democratic leader now finds it in her soul that those things need to come down. And by the way, they probably should. And that leads us to where we are currently, which is, what do you do about these statues? The statues, listen, I am a son of the South. I live in a house that was built by my great-grandfather, who was there the day that Lee surrendered at Appomattox. I own that house. I am his DNA. But I didn't fight that war, and I don't want to fight that war, and that is not my job to relitigate that war, just to make sure that the next generations don't do another one. And it seems to me we have a problem of race in this country, not talking about it, not dealing with it in a very upfront and logical manner. What you saw in Boston yesterday, I thought was fantastic. 4 or 5 bigots and a whole lot of non-bigots. That's good stuff. What you saw in Charlottesville, not so much.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to these statues, I think it's time for us to put them in museums, just like we did the Confederate flag in South Carolina down here. And let's learn. Let's also know what our founding fathers did, Washington, Jefferson, and others, which was to do nothing to stop the spread of slavery, and in fact lived with it and owned slaves. TJ was screwing his slaves. So let's have an honest conversation about this and find a way to move forward. not talking about it doesn't make it go away.
Yeah, and Mayor Gillum, I mean, of course, the big difference is that Washington and Jefferson, sort of built, worked to build and create the country as noxious and horrible as their personal behavior was, whereas Robert E. Lee worked to, fought against the United States. So it is sort of ironic that people sort of put them, and Donald Trump puts them on the same plane. But you yourself, sir, are in favor of the Florida Capitol removing a Confederate monument there. You want to be governor of Florida. A, do you think that that is a winning position politically for yourself in a state like Florida? And B, why do you want that monument removed?
Well, I'll tell you, first off, I really hate the conflating of our leaders. President Washington and General Lee don't deserve to be in the same sentence. One, a founder of this great country, obviously, although a very difficult history we have. The other who sought to destroy, to tear apart the United States of America. And so the president knows what he's doing. I find it unfortunate, but it's a continued demonstration of his absence of leadership on this issue. I do believe that we ought to take the Confederate monument that sits in front of the old Capitol of the state of Florida down. I believe that we shouldn't whitewash history. It belongs in museums, not as a greeting place as you enter the old Capitol. The state of Florida is too great, too diverse a state. We're the third largest state in the Union. If South Carolina can see fit to remove the Confederate flag from in front of its capital, why can't the state of Florida, given the rich diversity that we represent among these 50 states? What we need is leadership in the governor's mansion. We didn't get that from President Trump. My governor has been silent on the issue. And the leading contender on the Republican side basically said that he wasn't aware that there was a Confederate monument. And my response to that is, what a luxurious place to be.
Wow.
The fact that you don't have to be aware that these kinds of symbols of division and derision greet people as they enter the old Capitol. I don't want my kids fighting this same battle. And I don't think anybody's kids in this state should want to have to fight this battle into the future, which is why we need to act swiftly, with dignity, recognizing the history, the storied history of our part of the country and our state. But we need to move forward and be a forward-thinking state. And I think most Floridians can get behind that idea.
And Jennifer, like most things, Donald Trump has been all over the place on the issue of Confederate flags. Mayor Gillum just mentioned South Carolina and the Confederate flag being removed there after a lot of corporate pressure, let's be frank, and a white and black legislator in the state coming together to craft removing it. Nikki Haley got all the credit, but that's what actually happened. This is Donald Trump back in June of 2015. I think this is before he was an official candidate for the presidency, when he was just talking about it. And this is what he said about South Carolina's flag coming down. Take a listen.
You're the lone Republican presidential candidate who has yet to weigh in on whether or not you think the Confederate flag should be flying above the State House in South Carolina. Do you think it needs to go?
I think it probably does, and I think they should put it in the museum, let it go, respect whatever it is that you have to respect because it was a point in time, and put it in a museum. But I would take it down, yes.
Okay, that was in June of 2015. It was a week actually after he had declared himself a candidate for president, Jennifer. About a month later after he took the nomination, got the nomination, he sent his son to Mississippi, and Donald Trump Jr. went down and said, we revere state rights and we revere the Confederate flag. What is going on here?
Well, this is Donald Trump. He will blow with the wind, whatever he thinks people around him want to hear, or whatever he thinks will make him more popular. But let's be clear. This campaign was not based on economic uncertainty. He played on the economic uncertainty. It was based on white resentment and white grievance, which he whipped up, which he used, and he now sees that this is the logical extension of this, and we should see that it's the logical extension. He brought these people brought him into the mainstream, and now we can see exactly what he's talking about, exactly what he has used to rise to power. And I think we have to look carefully at the other supporters of this theme. We have to look at Fox News, which has beaten the Old South lost cause drum for a long time, which has exaggerated and demonized the illegal immigration problem. This was exactly what he did and what so many of us tried to warn the country about for over the last 18 months. And listen, I think it's a little pathetic that people are just now waking up, but I will take it. I will take anyone who is opening their eyes to what is actually going on. And at least there are some people, both in private life and public life, who are willing to disassociate themselves. I thought one of the most encouraging signs this week was a whole slew of charities canceling their events at Mar-a-Lago. And that's what we should do. Strangely enough, we should be shunning the President of the United States because he is responsible for beating the race drum. He is a noxious human being. And I think we should applaud people who are taking a stance.
And Jimmy, really quickly, you know, to the point of who is backing Donald Trump and why, there's some very interesting polling that came out from YouGov, Huffington Post. The question, is there a lot of discrimination against white people? All Americans, 40% say yes. Among Clinton voters, 17% say yes. Among Trump voters, 68% say yes. Is white nationalism a threat? Same poll. Very or somewhat or a serious threat. All Americans say 57%, but only 33% of Trump voters say it. There's a move right now, Senator Cory Booker is sponsoring, to remove Confederate statues in the Capitol, period, and Nancy Pelosi is supporting that. Do you think that can pass, given that there is a plurality of the United States, of white Americans, who think it is white America who's being discriminated against?
No, I don't think it'll pass. Senator Cory Booker, it's a great amendment and it's a great bill, but you have to get that bill. Let me put it this way. That bill will be filibustered, and it will most likely be filibustered by a Southern senator. You can count on that. So, no, I don't think it'll pass. But listen, I mean, the bottom line is Republicans need to have some soul searching here. You can't say you deplore discrimination and then send amicus briefs to the Supreme Court saying we should strike down Title II of the Civil Rights Act or voting rights or doing voting rights restrictions across the country. Those are antithetical to each other. If you're going to decry discrimination, try doing your legislation as well.
Yeah, and I should note, and we didn't get to talk about it, but there's also a Florida bill that a guy named Chevron Jones, who's a state legislator, is putting out that would get rid of all of the Confederate flags and monuments throughout the state. We'll see how that goes as well. Andrew Gillum and Jimmy Williams, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys being here. Jennifer will be back with us in our next hour. And in our next hour, Bannon TV might be coming your way, and an old frenemy of this show loses his security clearance. Keep it right here. The large anti-racism rally in Boston is just one of the many protests that we've seen since Donald Trump was elected. From the moment he took office, there has been a sizable resistance movement. But here's the reality. Elections have consequences. That means in 2018, you're going to need to do the same thing we urged you to do in 2016. Vote. Join me now, Jamil Smith, contributing writer for The Daily Beast, and Karine Jean-Pierre of MoveOn.org. And Jamil, you know, I get asked a lot, and I'm sure you guys get asked a lot too, what can we do? How can we get Donald Trump out of here? But the reality is Donald Trump won an election. It's very difficult to do anything other than elect a Congress that will constrain or impeach him, right?
Right. I mean, the thing is, people need to understand that what Donald Trump says is not nearly as important as what he's doing. And one of the things he's doing, of course, is trying to suppress the vote. This, this fraudulent election integrity commission is something that, frankly, all Democrats and hopefully all Republicans will start to stand up against. It's not enough to just send a tweet thinking that that's enough to resist white supremacy and white nationalism. You have to actually do the work.
And, you know, Karine, if you look at the map of 2016, you saw that Hillary Clinton won 487 counties. Trump won 2,626 counties. That's why that map looks like that. Now, of course, if you look at economic activity, Clinton's counties, they account for about 2/3 of the economic activity in the country, so they're bigger and they're more urban. But isn't the reality that what Democrats need to be focused on right now is voter registration and winning the 2018 midterms?
I think that's exactly right. I think we have to register voters. We have to, just like we're showing up at protests and we're showing up at town halls, we actually have to show up and vote as well. I mean, what's going to happen is Donald Trump and his allies are going to be thinking and hoping that we're too depressed, we're too down, that we don't have the energy to come out in 2018, and we have to show them wrong. And also, one thing that I want to say, Joy, is that Democrats need to let go of Trump voters. We don't want them. They're shrinking voters. Now we know exactly who Donald Trump is. We can't argue with that anymore. And so we should just focus focus on our base. We should focus on brown voters, black voters, women, millennials. That is our base, and we have to inspire them, get them out there so that they can go out and vote. We actually have policies that are more popular than Republicans. Even in some red states, we have our policies are more popular than Republicans. So let's tap into that. Let's inspire our base. Let's invest in our base and get them out to vote.
And Jill, you know, it's pretty consistent that Donald Trump has about 36 to 38% of the population. Whether you go Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, 3 key states that Hillary Clinton lost, his approval rating is 34 to 36%. If you look at the congressional preferences from the new NBC Marist poll in those 3 states, Democrats are winning those, and GOP is getting about what Donald Trump gets. One more piece from the new poll: whether or not voters in those 3 states feel that they're embarrassed or proud of Donald Trump. The question I asked our earlier guest. Only 25% say that the presidency of Donald Trump has made them proud. How is it that Democrats can't figure out how to beat Republicans who are tied to this guy?
Well, I think part of the problem is that one of the things that Donald Trump is doing, and Republicans have been doing for years, is trying to de-emphasize the importance of government itself. They're trying to make people more apathetic as opposed to just suppressing their votes through voter ID laws and whatnot. So I think what Karina's touching upon is getting people energized. Democrats need to touch on issues that matter to their base. And right now, with this a better deal that they're proposing, they're trying to divorce identity politics from economics. That's exactly the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, and the other thing they're trying to do is talk about primarying some people. The vulnerable senators are Indiana's Donnelly, Democrat; Missouri's Claire McCaskill, Democrat; Dean Heller, who's a Republican; and West Virginia's Joe Manchin. Should Democrats be thinking about primarying those people, Karine?
I think Democrats need to focus on the base that they have and stay really clear and focus there and make sure that they are talking about the issues that matter. I mean, if there are opportunities there in the Senate, I'm less, confident that that we're going to get the Senate. I think we should focus on the House for sure, and there's ways to do that. There's a path.
Yeah, I think we're going to put up on, I'd love to put up on our Facebook page a little bit the line of succession. Even if Donald Trump was impeached right now, you keep going down that line of succession, guys. It's all Republicans until you get to Ben Carson at number 13. I'm just saying. Jamil Smith and Karine Jean-Pierre, thank you very much, guys. And thank you. At the top of the hour, taking the fight outside, what Steve Bannon's ouster at the White House could mean for the staffers still inside.
If you think they're going to give you your country back without a fight, you are sadly mistaken. Every day it is going to be a fight.
Welcome back to AM Joy. Steve Bannon is now going to fight his fight from outside the White House. Just hours after ending his tenure as Trump's chief strategist, Bannon was back at the helm of Breitbart News. "I feel jacked up," he told the Weekly Standard. "Now I'm free. I got my hands back on my weapons." He's got his hands back on his weapons. So who's going to face the fury of Bannon the Barbarian, as he's now calling himself? He's 12. So far, Donald Trump has been supportive of his former aide and the outlet that he runs, tweeting, "Steve Bannon will be a tough and smart new voice at Breitbart News, maybe even better than ever before. Fake news needs the competition." But sources close to Bannon say that he plans to take on the so-called globalists in the White House. Figures like National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster and Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohn, both of whom have been facing the wrath of Breitbart in recent weeks. Criticism from the right, unfettered by the need to protect allies within the administration, would be a new challenge for Donald Trump. Because conservative media, from Fox News to the Sinclair Broadcast Group, which forces its TV stations to air White House talking points disguised as analysis, has consistently supported Donald Trump. But Trump's reaction to the events in Charlottesville scrambled the script. To be sure, some Fox News stalwarts came to his defense.
The president fought back. He did it in a big way. He let the media have it.
I don't think everyone that was part of that on Saturday were evil people.
I don't know how far they want to take it. Maybe they'll take it to certain books that they think are offensive.
But some were actually openly critical of Trump's equivocation.
It shouldn't be some kind of bold statement to say, yes, a gathering full of white supremacist Nazis doesn't have good people in it. Those are all bad people, period.
Charlottesville showed there may be limits to conservative media's support for Trump, which begs the question, is there an opening for Bannon to create a far right media giant? Joining me now, Gabe Sherman, special correspondent for Vanity Fair, Jennifer Rubin, opinion writer at The Washington Post, Kurt Bardella, former Breitbart media consultant, and Sarah Rumpf, Republican strategist. Thank you all for being here. Gabe, I'm going to go to you first. The idea of whether Breitbart could actually build an alternate universe version that's to the right of Fox News. There's an article on DigiDay that talks about some of the troubles that Breitbart is having right now. They're They're facing traffic declines, advertiser blacklists, campaigns by marketers to steer clear of them, and even a petition within Amazon for it to stop providing ad services to them. There are just 26 brands appearing on Breitbart in May, down from a high of 242 in March, according to Media Radar, and that's even before the alt-right became directly tied to the Nazism and white supremacism going on in Charlottesville. One more little one. A site that's even to the right of Breitbart, InfoWars, has now been reduced to selling diet supplements in order to survive. Since 2013, Alex Jones, who is in touch with Donald Trump, a friend of his, has been pushing a collection of dietary supplements. All the display ads that are selling on InfoWars are dietary supplements. Can a right-wing media outlet survive if advertisers won't touch it?
Well, Joy, that's a very important question. I think the answer is whether you look at a right-wing media platform as a business or as a political project. And Steve Bannon was huddling this past week with his benefactor, billionaire Robert Mercer, in New York. And my sources close to Bannon say, yes, a TV venture, a media empire is something he is discussing. And, you know, whether or not there is a market and a business model to support that, clearly there is the political motivation that the Mercers have and Steve Bannon have to take this nationalist, economic, populist message to the broadest audience possible. And so I think you'll see in the coming days and weeks Bannon making moves. I already hear that Breitbart is going to restart its global expansion, which stalled during the time Bannon went in the White House. They're going to try to make this the biggest platform possible. And
Gabe, are you saying that the Mercers, and they are billionaires, they have the money, that they'd be willing to just go ahead and fund it at a loss, even if they couldn't get advertising?
I think so. I think, you know, the Mercers have contributed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars already to Steve Bannon's various political ventures. You know, whether or not you see a return on that capital, it depends how you define return. Sure. I think without question the Mercers have seen that their investments have paid off in the complete shift you've seen to this sort of populist, nationalist, white nationalist wing of the Republican Party. And so I think, you know, they will see another round of investment in Steve Bannon as a good use of their money. Yeah, and
I've always urged people to read the Jane Mayer profile on Robert Mercer. His racial views are very interesting, and his views in general are very, very far to the right. They're very Breitbartian. I want to go to you on this, Kurt, on Breitbart itself and sort of their reach, because people, you know, Republicans will say all the time when we interview them on TV, I never heard of them. I never heard of Steve Bannon. I don't know anything about them. This is their reach as of June of this year. 10.76 million unique visitors, which is down 53% from November of 2016. They ranked number 60 among U.S.-based sites, according to the Washington Post. And then just to put them in perspective in terms of scale, Fox News reaches 93 million households. Sinclair Broadcasting, which broadcasts the White House propaganda from Boris Epstein and forces stations to take it, reaches 83 million households. One America News, which Sarah Palin used to have a show on, reaches 30 million households. Breitbart.com, and it's apples to oranges. So it's not, you know, it's kind of apples to oranges when you talk ratings versus users. They reach that 10.76 million. And little InfoWars, our friend Alex Jones, reaches 3.4 million unique visitors. So on scale, is Breitbart poised to be truly competitive with the much bigger outlets like Sinclair and Fox?
Well, I think right there you explain the rationale of why Steve is so interested in potentially going down the TV route, because there's no substitute for getting that scale of audience when you have the opportunity to be on television. And if you're truly going to compete with the Fox Newses and really what Sinclair has been doing and expanding into local markets, that you're going to have to be on television. And I think that you're seeing Steve continue what really started a year ago, which is, remember, before Donald Trump won this election, everybody was talking about the idea that if Trump loses, he will team up with Steve Bannon and start what we call Trump TV. And I think you're seeing now Steve continue that conversation, and he has the benefit of a billionaire on his side. And it's not about, I think Gabe put it really well, how you calculate what the profit is very, you know, that's in the eye of the beholder. If you can impact change, if you can influence policy, if you can completely reshape a political party, that's worth a lot more potentially than any particular advertising revenue in any quarter of a year. And I think that's the key X factor. If Mercer's going to open up the pocket and cut big checks, they're going to be able to make some serious impact.
Let me ask you this quick to stay with you for a second, Kurt. What does, you know Steve Bannon, what does he want? Is he ideological like Robert Mercer, or does he just want to make money?
Oh, I don't think it's about money. If that were the case, he would have stayed at Goldman Sachs all these years ago, and retired off of Seinfeld royalties. I think for Steve, he's laid it out very clearly. It's about destroying the establishment, destroying all the pillars that he believes have kept America in this globalist type of mentality. He wants to completely obliterate everything.
Yeah, he's a Leninist, after all, self-described. Sarah, let's listen to Corey Lewandowski, who used to be the campaign manager for Donald Trump. He was on Fox and Friends this morning talking about Bannon using this outside strategy and taking on Congress. Take a listen.
That gives him some more freedom to hold those individuals accountable who are not on the Trump agenda. And that's very important because a number of those individuals who are not on the Trump agenda are going to be up for re-election next year, and there should be accountability at the ballot box.
Themselves on the beach there. Sarah, one of the things Breitbart has managed to do is to reach a younger audience, obviously much younger than Fox. Are young conservatives hungry for that Bannonite message that Corey Lewandowski seems to think they are?
Well, I mean, if you look at the trouble that Trump had reaching Generation X and millennial voters, I don't know that that necessarily holds true. What Breitbart in the past few years has been good at doing is reaching that angry, disenfranchised, frustrated segment of the conservative population. When I hear, though, you know, the president tweeting attacks against Republican members of Congress, what Corey Lewandowski just said, it just reminds me, Andrew Breitbart, the man who the website was named after, wrote a book in the year before he died, and he talked about what he called the Democrat media complex. He thought it was a problem for people like George Stephanopoulos in the inner circle of the Clinton administration and then going to ABC as a journalist. The intersection between Democratic politics and the media he thought was corrupt and problematic, and the role of the new media was to shine a spotlight on it. The idea of using the site named after him to duplicate the same thing on the right, I mean, I'll leave it to your viewers to decide whether that's something that Andrew would have really wanted. But Larry O'Connor, who was a very good friend of Andrew's and who ran the Breitbart.tv for him, I mean, he tweeted again in the past few days, Andrew wanted to destroy the Democrat media complex, not duplicate it.
Yeah, so, really quickly, Sarah, just really before I leave you, you know, Republicans your age, millennial Republicans, where do they get their news?
Well, I'm a little older than a millennial, but you know,
claim millennial status as long as you can.
You know, people under 40 are getting their news mostly online. So you know, this is where the issue of what's spreading on Facebook, whether things are accurately, you know, accurate headlines, whether news is accurate and trustworthy, that is a problem. Yeah. And we've got a lot of intersection of pop culture and entertainment and politics and news, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, you know, there's some definite drawbacks to getting some of these issues mixed up.
Yeah, and Jennifer, you know, I asked that question because, you know, part of the power of these sort of new media outlets is that they can reach people outside of even Fox News as mainstream media, right? So do the people who oppose this spreading ideology really have, in your view, a coherent strategy to counter it?
I don't think they do. And remember how Breitbart and others operate. It's sort of an upward flow. What starts in Breitbart then migrates to Fox, then migrates to websites, then migrates elsewhere. So what they do is kind of generate these memes, these themes that then kind of infect the rest of the media. And pretty soon everyone is talking about their very odd spin on things. So I think what we saw in Boston is sort of a model for this. And the way to beat free speech that you don't like is more free speech. So I'll make a pitch to billionaires who have a social conscience: invest in real media. Invest in outlets that, in your local paper, for example, which has really been starved for resources over the years. So yes, I think the center and the left and the responsible right have to come up with a strategy for expanding the news that is accurate and is going to be responsible and help us recover our democracy.
Yeah, real quick, Gabe, is Rupert Murdoch worried about the competition from the far right?
Without question. You know, my sources close to the Murdochs say that he's very troubled by the Sinclair Tribune deal. In fact, one source said that that's why he pushed Donald Trump to fire Steve Bannon, because he saw Steve Bannon as being supportive of the Sinclair Tribune merger. And Fox News sees the prospect of a Sinclair-backed cable news venture, or just using their national reach through the broadcast stations they now control, as a real competition to Fox News's control on the conservative media in general.
All right, thank you very much.
And there's a lot of big-name talent on the sidelines right now, too.
Yeah, that's right, who have got to go somewhere. Gabriel Sherman, Jennifer Rubin, Sarah Rumpf, we're going to try to get hashtag Rumpf Don't Crack, because she is a millennial forever. And Kurt Bardella is going to be sticking around. Thank you, guys. And up next, reality sets in for one of Trump's biggest fans. Groups like avid conspiracy theorist Jack Posobiec, formerly of The Rebel, are still defending Charlottesville. On Monday, Posobiec complained that the media spent more time reporting on the white supremacist rally where counter-protester Heather Heyer was killed than on gun violence in Chicago. And remarkably, Donald Trump retweeted him. Now, Trump may or may not know who Posobiec is, likely not, despite the fact that the White House did give him press access. But we here at AM Joy, well, we're certainly familiar. So in the last 100 years, when would be the era? Because he says, make America great again.
Where America